All right. Homeostasis. Now, when you try to differentiate, when you try to go to your parents and you try to cut off some of this codependency, you're going to find that there's a concept called homeostasis. And that means that this family system is balanced. When Papa drinks, somebody on the other side compensates. And when a little girl runs away from home, the family compensates. The family always tries to maintain its balance. I've heard of women that have begged their husbands for years to stop smoking. Then the husband stopped smoking. That upset the balance. And he was so ornery that the woman begged him to start smoking again. The system always seeks its homeostasis. It always seeks its balance. So when you try to work a different role in your home, you're going to find that all the pressures in the world from parents, uncles, aunts are going to try to put pressure on you to get back to your normal role. And when you try to step out of the role that mom and dad have for you, there's going to be tremendous pressure for you to get put back in that role. So disconnecting and connecting are very, very, very important processes. And this is what therapy is all about. People don't know how to connect, or they're fused, or they don't know how to disconnect, or they're distanced. So the whole problem of therapy has to do with this connecting and disconnecting and the fusion. Now boundaries, an extremely, extremely important concept. Boundaries, most of you don't have very good boundaries because you haven't thought of it in boundary terms. Boundaries is like you've got a real self in here. Have I got pseudo-self and basic self here? Let's talk about those. Inside of you is a real person. This is that Jung called the divine child, or the basic self. This is the basic or the real self. And this is who you really are. This is non-negotiable. And when you were born and you came into the world, this little person presented itself to the world. And all of a sudden, the world started socializing this little person and putting pressure on to do this and not do this, and hurry up on that, and hurry up, and don't do that, and believe this, and don't do that. And so the child started, instead of being accepted, they felt rejected somewhat. And so there was a pain around this. And so the child began to build what we call a pseudo-self, the pretend self, the negotiable self. That self was built up around the real person so that this person would be accepted and liked and protected. Do you understand? Now, this pseudo-self, this self here, is what we project. And we don't see the basic self. It is the pseudo-self that fuses with other people. The pseudo-self changes like a chameleon. The pseudo-self has little morals. They're one person at work, one person at the sports event. They're just different people. And they adjust to whatever they need to adjust to, regardless of the morals and the principles involved. The basic self is who you are. Now, what you want is a huge, 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 huge basic self and a little teeny pretend self. And you can adjust that. What we really want is absolute congruency between the inner self and the outside self. And that causes less anxiety. And in this personality model, anxiety is caused by not being undifferentiated. The more undifferentiated you are, the higher your anxiety level. Because the more you're trying to perform for other people and be accepted on their terms, etc. The more disconnected you are, the more individuated you are, the more your real self you are, the less anxiety you have. And the more peace you have. So if you're real anxious, in this theory, that means you're really fused. You're really hooked into a dysfunctional system. If you know who you are, and you have lots of personal peace, and you're congruent, you're inside and out, then you have, and you don't have a lot of anxiety, then you are differentiated. Okay? So we have this basic self and the pseudo-self. The pseudo-self then is the pretend self. And this is what the child becomes as they begin to adapt. And they become this to lower the pain. And when they become this other person, the pretend self, then they're the jock at school or the pleaser, and they're doing their role. Can you see how your kids, you can put them in those roles? And when you communicate to the child, what do you want to communicate with? This basic self here. That's where you want to hit. Now, you have a real self inside. It's non-negotiable. And in any situation, anywhere, under any kind of pressure, that non-negotiable self will not change. They'll be honest, or they'll believe this, or they'll do this. They will never, ever change. That's your real self. So our point is, we got to stop becoming and rewarding our children from conforming to everything. And say, Tommy, how do you feel about this? Well, I feel this way. Well, it's okay to feel that way. Daddy feels this way. I disagree. But I love you. Maybe when you're my age, you'll see it different too. Maybe you never will. But it's okay to feel that way. Do you see how you're allowing the child to be their natural self, their real self? You've got to understand that we've got to validate this real person here. That this child has a right to life. And we need to honor that. It's sacred. That we need to honor this child and give him his right to feel and to think and to be. And to accept him as that. I wish I could raise my kids again. Probably so do they, or they wouldn't dare do it.